Mr. Kind's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, let me just preface my remarks by echoing what Mr. Paulson, Mr. Neal said previously, that I believe the medical device industry is an incredibly important industry for our country. It's one of the major manufacturers that is growing. I have many large and small these device manufacturers in Wisconsin and the upper Midwest. They do have a tremendous economic impact, and therefore I'm very sympathetic for finding different ways of paying for the Affordable Care Act other than using a measure like this. And I've always said from the beginning that if we can find some reasonable offsets to replace this medical device excise tax, I'm open to that, and I'm fair game. But it is troublesome that we're moving forward with another markup in a provision that helps pay for health care reform without talking about any offsets, without talking about any alternatives. And our ranking member, Mr. Levin, is right, that this should be more vetted in the committee so we can explore the consequences of alternative offsets rather than waiting for the 11th hour, throwing it on the House floor, if that's the Chair's intent to do. And we haven't gotten clarification of whether or not you or the majority party will even offer an offset for the repeal of this provision. Now, I'll support the legislation initially today, but with the proviso that hopefully we're going to have a reasonable offset to replace the revenue that we're missing from it. And what made the Affordable Care Act so difficult to pass to begin with is the President made clear, and everyone who supported it agreed, it had to be paid for. It wasn't going to add to the deficit. And that's why when the Congressional Budget Office scored the Affordable Care Act, they found that it would reduce the deficit by over $180 billion in the first 10 years and by $1.2 trillion over 20 years because it was paid for, and it was the right thing to do. And items like this is what paying for things look like around here, which oftentimes isn't that palatable, and it's not very comforting knowing that we have to do it, but it's the right thing to do in light of the large structural budget deficits that we're facing today. I mean, there are still members of this committee that supported the largest expansion of Medicare with the passage of the prescription drug bill back in '04, and not a nickel of it was paid for. And now they're running around today scratching their head, wondering why we're dealing with huge budget deficits today. That adds to the structural deficits that are going on year after year because of decisions that were made not to pay for things in this committee or in previous Congresses that we're living with the consequences today. So I hope we're not going down this road now of trying to piecemeal repealing items that were used to pay for the Affordable Care Act, but without finding reasonable alternatives to replace it with, which will only compound the deficit problem that we're wrestling with. And Mr. Barthow, I have a question for you, whether or not this excise tax has a different impact between the device manufacturers, large or smaller. Because I've been hearing a lot from the smaller manufacturers in particular that this is a particularly unpleasant provision that they're wrestling with right now. Is there some economic disparate impact that's affecting smaller manufacturers as opposed to the larger ones in the United States?
Mr. Kind, I'm not aware of a particular problem, large versus small. The issue that you might be hearing might go to the point that has been discussed, the extent to which the tax is passed forward into a final price that can be recovered may differ by product. And so if there are some for which the incidence is such that more of it may fall on the producer, those may be some of the smaller manufacturers you're hearing from. I don't know, and I don't think a general statement.
Well, let me ask you this. Mr. Neal made it clear in his statement earlier that there was an agreement that was reached. It was a negotiated agreement with the industry in that. But there seems to be some confusion in the committee of whether or not the Affordable Care Act is going to increase market expansion for the medical device industry with the entry of more people, more paying customers, but also, quite frankly, the aging population, those individuals entering Medicare in future years. So is the medical device industry looking at an expansion of market share through the Affordable Care Act?
Well, as I noted, and I won't attribute any percentage to the Affordable Care Act or not, I'll make two general points. One, to repeat, in the baseline projections that we've made in conjunction with the Congressional Budget Office are that this industry will continue to grow. The effect of the excise tax by raising prices discourages some use, and so it won't grow as rapidly. In terms of what drives the underlying growth, one fact One factor can be aging population, another factor can be expansion of coverage. I don't have percentages as to which is which, and that would also tend to vary again by type of product.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Stark.